I'm opening. We have an eye, sort of a nostril, 2 teeth. One of the teeth has a small cavity. Close call, folks, but I think we got here just in time.
Presented by Maria Menounos and Kevin Undergaro. This is Anatomy of a Movie. In-depth discussions and breakdowns of various movie titles. And now that you've seen the movie, let the dissection begin.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Anatomy of a Movie. Today we are doing RoboCop 1987 version. We figured we'd do this movie first before the second relaunch of the RoboCop comes out in theaters. I'm your host, Marisa Serafini, and I have today with me
Demetri Panos, dead or alive, you're coming with me.
Hello, Demetri. And then we also have Phil Spitek in the booth.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen.
All right, so Demetri, I know you love this movie. 1987, that was a great year for film.
It really was. This is our second...
Paul Verhoeven.
Yeah, this is our second trip in the DeLorean, so to speak, going back to 1987. We had done Planes, Trains, and Automobiles,
yep.
So there's a lot to talk about. Yeah, 1987 was a good movie,
Great
and yeah, we're going back to July 17th of 1987.
It's a good summer blockbuster film.
Yeah, well, I would even go as far as calling RoboCop a sleeper.
Okay.
You know, when this movie came out, you had the title RoboCop, and it to me, it's a great title. It's the one-word title that pretty much tells you everything you need to know about the movie. However, it was that title that it was one of its major hindrances in getting made. But in 1987, you know, July 17th, RoboCop opened up 1,580 locations and brought in just a little over $8 million. So on the amount of locations,
that was for the first day.
For opening weekend.
Opening weekend, okay.
It did $8 million. And again, we've always we talk about box office, and we talk about how many locations movies open up, and we've talked about like The Hobbit or Hunger Games, when you're opening up on 4,000 locations and you're bringing in hundreds of millions of dollars on like an opening weekend. This movie only 15, just a little over 1,500 locations. And it was number one. It opened up to number one. Its competition for movies that opened that weekend was Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, a reissue, which opened up at number 2, and then the very classic Jaws: The Revenge opened up at number 3. You know, and then you had Revenge of the Nerds, was the number 4 movie that weekend. Full Metal Jacket, so you had a Stanley Kubrick film out there. You had Dragnet with Tom Hanks and Dan Aykroyd.
A lot of notable films back in 1987.
Yeah, absolutely. Adventures in Babysitting.
Oh,
you know, one of my favorite movies. You know, Inner Space.
We need to recap that one.
Absolutely. You know what?
I'd be down for that.
Absolutely. And you know, Inner Space, Beverly Hills Cop 2, The Witches of Eastwick. You had, in that summer, people had a lot of great movies to go see, including RoboCop.
And especially all those movies that you had just listed, they span all these different demographics. So
Absolutely.
You got your pick of the mill of whatever kind of type of movie you wanted to
Absolutely.
see. And RoboCop definitely fit in with that kind of action / maybe sci-fi a little bit. And that action movie that everyone loves to see in summer. Yeah,
it was action. It had satire. It made fun of the 80s. People were able to get the humor. You know, the big fear from the studio standpoint, were people going to accept the violence? It was over-the-top violence. But that was the 80s. The 80s, early 90s, for whatever reason, you know, the MPAA were taking naps. And it was, you know, violence and sex were encouraged. You know, you couldn't release a movie like without having some major sex scene in the 80s. And like the number 2 movie of that year was Fatal Attraction. So rated R, violent, a lot of sex. So yeah, but RoboCop was one of those movies, at least for me. You know, you saw the trailer. It looked, you know, compared to movies that you'd seen prior, like the Star Wars movies, big special effects. You know, it sort of kind of had this B-movie feel to it, and it was called RoboCop. I remember.
Yeah, and you had touched upon that RoboCop, the actual title from the beginning. That people had trouble getting latched onto the name.
Yeah, they had a hard time.
A hard start to it.
Yeah, RoboCop it's one of those movies. I love these things. It was a movie that came about because of happy accidents. You had Ed Neumeyer, who at the time was a production executive, I believe, around Universal, and he happened to be around the set or near close proximity to them filming Blade Runner at the time. And he thought about what Blade Runner was about a human, about a cop who was hunting robots. And he got the idea of, well, what if I make a robot cop who hunts bad guys? And that was the genesis of his idea. And he ended up co-writing with a gentleman by the name of Michael Miner. And they sort of collaborated because Michael Miner had an idea about a human who gets special powers and is a cop. And they said, well, what if we make him RoboCop? What if we blend human and technology? Which is sort of cool because...
Exactly, and that's the title, Robo and Cop.
RoboCop. It says everything you need to know.
Part machine, part man.
Yeah.
All cop.
All cop.
Okay, and I believe that's their tagline.
That's the tagline. And again, if you follow anatomy of a movie, we were talking about her and its melding of technology and human interaction. Like this one blends technology and human interaction. And it talks about the movie's, one of its themes is technology and how we as humans can interact with it. So thematically, I still think RoboCop's relevant, but just going by to the genesis. So you had Ed Neumeyer and Michael Miner were writing the script. Or they had this script. They were passing it around town. Nobody got past the name. They said RoboCop, stupid.
Next.
And they were throwing it in the pile. Meanwhile, you had this Dutch director, Paul Verhoeven. The politics over where he lived had changed. And he used to get Dutch financing for his movies. And because the politics have changed, his financing got cut. And he had nothing on his slate. His wife had went through the pile of scripts, and she found this RoboCop. He had already read the script. He said, according to Verhoeven, he barely got past page 20, and he tossed it aside. Stupid. His wife read the entire thing and said, I think you should reread this because this has your sensibilities all over it. He did. Orion Pictures, they got him to direct it along with Ed Neumeyer, and the movie got made. They gave it financing, and at the time, this movie cost $13 million. For a science fiction technology-based movie, $13 million compared to other big science fiction movies of that time, that's a cheap budget.
Yeah. And what they did with that budget, there was a lot of shootouts, which was that's actually fairly simple to film, but there was stop animation in this movie, so that took, I'm sure, a lot of time, and a lot of money to do that for the first RoboCop version in this movie, but what the small amount that they had compared to normal movies, they really did make a big spectacle out of it.
Absolutely.
And I applaud them.
Yeah, and I think too with their budget, I think by having that budget, it gives that movie a gritty feel to it. That gritty, dirty, you felt like downtown Detroit, a futuristic downtown Detroit. It really doesn't. I don't know. You look at some pictures of Detroit, which is bankrupt.
Yeah.
I mean, this is 1987, folks. And
Detroit looked like a really good city back then. And, now, unfortunately, Detroit's a bit run down. I mean, they're building back up. But as an audience, we know what Detroit really looks like. And that looks like a more ideal type of city for Detroit. But I did love how this movie began, the validity of everything. They started on news stories and news stories that were actually relevant, and that back in the 90s of the version, and you mentioned there was Challenge, the Challenger explosion. They touched upon a lot of real true stories that happened, which added more validity to what was happening in the police force. So it made the audience believe, like, if these real events are occurring, then this guy, this RoboCop, is real.
Yeah, no, and you know, the news breaks sort of kind of are your chapter holders. It's Act 1. There are about 3 news breaks. And the first one signifies, here's the opening. This is Act 1. There's another one about midway through Act 2, and then there's one for Act 3. And what's interesting about the first news break that you get these 2, let's call it, I mean, they're all, in a sense, fake stories, but these 2 stories that have what's going on around in society. Mm-hmm. And the third story they mention, that's the meat of our issue that's going on in RoboCop. You get OCP Corporation. It just basically sets up, they've bought out the police department. Police are dying like daily. And it opens up with, 3 more officers were shot and killed today. Mm-hmm. One Frank Fredrickson is still alive, and he's hunting, and he pointed out Francis Boddicker, or Boddicker as the person who's responsible for this. And we learn through that exposition that Boddicker has killed up to that point 30 or 31 cops.
He's the bad guy.
And he's the bad guy. And it sets up, that's the meat, that's setting up the pins. Mm-hmm. Because we're going to come across Boddicker a little bit later on down the line. We learn that Fredrickson, the poor cop, dies. And that happens during a scene where the cops are they're just fed up. They're being moved around and manipulated. They don't have the manpower, and they actually start throwing around the word strike. And
strike. That the police force are actually being affected. This is a real thing that's happening in their time.
And that gets us into our story. And it's a very clever way to do it without just letting a figurehead talk. You see, it goes right into our story. It leads right in. And, it's interesting to note, too, that 1987, not too long before 87, you had Frank Miller's Dark Knight. Very seminal graphic novel came out. And in that graphic novel, he does use news anchors as an exposition as to what's going on. I found it very interesting that RoboCop used that same kind of framework, in a sense. Mm-hmm. And then, is it a coincidence that Frank Miller wrote the original draft for RoboCop 2 and he got credited for parts of RoboCop 3? So it's just really interesting how in the 80s we were looking at, Dark Knight was a very dark, cynical, mean look and reinvented Batman as we knew him back there. And RoboCop 2 is a very cynical look at the politics of the 80s. And it plays
police
on that
force,
cynicism.
What's really going on behind the
corporations
scenes.
Taking over, and and that became the satire of and that's what makes RoboCop special to today. And you can watch it today, and there are still things that are relevant as they were.
Oh,
back then.
I definitely agree. And the good thing about like 1980s movies that usually they have a message throughout the whole movie.
Oh, sure.
And that just the need that there is corruption in politics in the police force, and that they want to do something about it to help fix it. And they realize all these police force, they're dying every single day. They're getting killed off, and they're just dropping like flies. And they're like, what's a good way to fix that? Let's build a robot cop that is better, like 2.0 version that they can't kill. He has all the morals and principles of what a good police
they program him to be that way, right?
And I thought that like having something as inhuman, I guess, that's not a real technical, real human, but still having the human qualities to it.
Sure.
That I loved.
Yeah, and also, we'll talk about themes and satire and things like that, but also you can look at RoboCop as a Western. I mean, there's a new sheriff in town, and his name is RoboCop. And Peter Weller or Alex Murphy, RoboCop, he signifies that new wave in fighting crime in the city, in a sense, and he becomes the saving grace. He is, if ever there was a metaphor for a knight in shining armor, You look at RoboCop. He is in shining armor that gleams, and he is the knight, and it has that Western feel to it as well.
Especially him spinning around his pistol.
Absolutely.
Yeah, very Western, but I loved his character. He was out in the force to do good.
Yeah.
And he established that when he first meets Lewis and whatnot, that he is a good cop. He has a good head on his shoulders, and he's out there, just to put, to save people, to save humans, and that's his job.
Yep. I mean, yeah, he's a good guy.
Yeah,
he's a good guy, and you learn whether he's Murphy or RoboCop. You learn that his inner self, his morality was centered. He was a good cop, and corruption wasn't something that was going to sway him.
Yeah, and I'm glad that they touched upon that so fast in the movie, because his character, being the main guy in this movie, dies in the first 10 minutes.
Yeah,
in a very, very violent death.
Absolutely.
And I'm glad they touched upon that first.
Yeah, I mean, to me, another layer of RoboCop that I think is fantastic is that it's done in a very European manner, in a sense. It's done sort of kind of backwards. If you look at movies today, how they would normally do a setup like this, and I believe, without having seen the remake, but just touching upon the trailers, you would get to know your character pretty early on, and they would throw all the characterization on, like, you see that he's with a family, he's a loving dad, he's a good cop, he has a moral center. They would set up the character that way and then kill him, and you'd be empathetic,
and then
because
you would
he's a
feel
good
for
guy.
him.
Right. Well, Paul Verhoeven, he was criticized a lot for the violence that was done in this movie. And I had read an interview, this was back in 1987, and I was in college, and I was taking script writing classes, and reading this interview was actually like one of my first insights as to how to integrate certain things into a script and have them mean something. And in this case, it was the violence. And Verhoeven pretty much came out and said, look, he goes, I have this guy, I'm going to throw him on screen, I got to kill him in 10 minutes. He comes on screen, nothing about him other than he's transferred. It sort of hints that he has a wife and child, because he talks about his kid, and his kid likes him, likes this cop character. So he has a wife and child, but we've never seen him. He's out to do good. He's there. He goes, the audience, to just kill him, to just have him shot
ruthlessly.
Well, if he were just to have been shot, how do you empathize with that? He goes, I had to really go for it, and I had to make his death extremely violent, because the shock factor, because of how he died so violently, was going to bring you into the story. And then from there, we're going to learn about Murphy. He goes back to the house. We see the wife more. We see, and, I found that fascinating. What a way to use violence in a way that's not, it's gratuitous for a reason. It wasn't just gratuitous just for the sake of it being the 80s and we can do this. It's set up, and it really works, because he dies so horrifically. You can't not but have empathy for him. And I feel that the same thing too, if we're seeing this through Lewis's eyes, Nancy Allen's character, she too sees how he gets killed. Yeah. And hence that leaves a lasting repercussion on her. So when later on down the line, she recognizes him,
Yeah, and
there's a bond.
But before this, we touched upon that. I was still questionable of Murphy and Lewis's relationship, because Lewis literally had just met him that day.
Right.
And I was just questioning whether she knew him long enough to realize and help him with his self-awareness in the later part of the movie. I'm like, was the relationship strong enough yet for her to bring Murphy back to himself? It's
a valid question, and we had a really great discussion, and we'll further it here. And I was like, I think to an extent, yes, because you see, number one, how Alex Murphy meets Lewis. She's kicking ass to some perp that she's bringing in.
Oh, she's not to be messed with.
She is not to be messed with.
I just got to touch upon all the women in the police force. I loved how the equality of
Yeah.
everyone, that they still had the same armor.
Yeah.
They all looked alike. If you
And-
put a helmet on all of them, you couldn't tell the difference between a man and a woman.
And they were all changing in the same room.
And they're all shooting in the
Right?
same
Yep, there was
shooting range.
no separation.
No,
Like it was equality.
and I love that about the 80s.
Yeah, it was, and you think about it, it's a great point because there's that great shot where they're inside the locker room and the camera's panning, and there are two women amongst the guys, and they're
all shooting just like everyone else.
and they're slinging the dialogue, they're swearing, doing whatever, and talking about their woes. Women were treated equally, and they were given a strong role. Like Nancy Allen as Lewis, she's a strong character.
Yes.
She has one flaw. Apparently she likes penis because that would distract her and got her knocked out.
Yeah, but she's a woman.
But yeah, exactly. And what I like about the Lewis character, and we'll go back to their relationship, which sets up really well, is when they first go out and she's like, I drive, and he's like, nope, when I break in my partners, I always drive. And they go out, so already the bonding is starting.
Yes.
And then they're at the coffee place, and they're taking their little lunch break, and Lewis realizes that Murphy, has the wife and kid, and that he wants to impress his kid. And you could tell she finds that endearing, but then they get that call. They get that fateful call, and who drives? She goes, I'm driving. He goes, okay, you drive. And you could tell that there
and I
was
love how
a
she
bond.
took point in that.
Yep, she takes point, and they go in. They can't get back up. And when you see how that scene plays,
16 minutes.
Yeah.
Until they get reinforcements.
And even when
That's
they
a long time.
got there, in that car chase scene too, like that was a really well edited scene.
I agree.
But when they get there, it's like, okay, your call. What do you think? And she goes, yeah, we should do this. Let's do this. And he goes, okay. He goes, always be in communication. So,
And I think that's another factor that would probably help Lewis near the middle of the movie when she's trying to help Murphy realize who he is, that she was originally the person who said, let's do it.
Right.
Go storm that building, and it had all the bad guys in there. And so that would probably be another factor that made her more guilty of what happened to Murphy, because she's the one that gave the go-ahead.
Yeah.
So I think it was just another thing that helped her just help Murphy in the end, because maybe she did feel responsible for that.
Yeah, and it, it's good to have the human touch, and when you think about it, she was like the only human who, again, if we're looking through Lewis's eyes, she's the one human that, nobody from OCP is going to help him because they've already turned their backs. They're trying to kill him too. You don't have the bad guys. The cops are striking. They ain't going to help him because he's an OCP product.
Yeah.
So Murphy's the one human who is going to go out and give her humanity to him, and that helps resurrect him as well. So, I think it's a great play. I had seen, or I was watching this, there was a Q&A on the Blu-ray, which, by the way, is 4K remaster of RoboCop. You can get it for like under $10 or $10. Great bonus features, including a Q&A of a screening that took place in, I think it was like 2012. And Verhoeven talks about there was a draft of the script that he asked Neumeier and Miner to write, in which Murphy and Lewis had an affair. And he goes, I want to put that in there. And they did. The director asked. He read it and he said, nope, doesn't work. He goes, let's stick with draft 2. And so I find that's interesting that he explored that, but they had like some rules that they set up too, and one of them was he doesn't kiss the girl at the end, he doesn't fly, and something, and they pretty much stayed to those rules. So Lewis becomes, in a sense, his needle in the compass to get him. Remember, she also helps him with the targeting towards the end.
Yeah, and I loved how they kept to that objective. He was out for the guys who had ruthlessly killed him at the beginning, and then that was it. And there was really no other thing that he had to touch upon, because we didn't really see his family until he goes back to his house. And I mean, there weren't other storylines that needed to be tied up at the end of the movie.
No, it's pretty self-contained. And again, what for me works about RoboCop, and it works even today, is its layers. It's like an onion. You can look at it as an action movie. You can look at it thematically. You can look at it as a satire. You can look at the religious themes.
The religious
you can look at the
undertones,
revenge theme, and finding one's humanity surrounded by technology. In the 80s, we were getting to that point too, where technology was really starting to
blur.
Blur,
and let's talk about that, because Terminator,
that was out, came up before.
Yeah, that was out in the 80s, and so I think the audience have already seen some of that, and I loved how they blended the robot to humans, but also being considered and part of the humanity in that way, that like he was a robot, but they still treated him with human qualities, and they had all these principles, like all these the 4 rules,
right?
For arrest and whatnot.
His prime directives.
Yes, his prime directives.
And it's I'm glad you mentioned Terminator, because Ed Neumeier talked about Terminator. He thought about Terminator, and he said, he looked at Terminator as a horror movie. A horror movie of what the future can be and bring this wrath. He's like, I didn't want RoboCop to be a horror movie. I did want it to be a satire and make this message. But at the same time, I wanted it to be a Western. I did want it to be good guys, bad guys. And, these various themes that are in there, which Verhoeven, to his credit, really ramped up those themes a lot.
I think so too, because visually. I feel as I remember, Terminator, he had a hard time understanding human emotions and whatnot. And then I feel like RoboCop understood more human emotions than Terminator did.
Yeah.
So I loved how they brought that to this character in this type of movie.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I have no idea what we could talk a little later. I have no idea what the remake is going to do thematically.
The remake of RoboCop.
But, speaking of RoboCop, I mean, thematically, what we have here in a movie is, number one, you get the social satire, playing on the politics, playing on corporation greed.
And corruption behind
everything. Making fun of fashion and making fun of the silly sitcom. The one-liner that is just repeated over, I'll buy that for $1. I mean... My boss, Cammy, when I was talking about RoboCop, she goes, I'll buy that for $1. And I'm like, people know that line from this movie. And, it plays because the scenes, it's almost like Benny Hillish slapstick, this show that they're watching, that everybody seems to watch.
There was comedy in this movie.
Yeah, there's comedy. Absolutely. The commercials.
Oh, yeah.
The Nukem
advertising.
Game. Yeah, it was all about... comedy and
then
making fun of.
The scenarios that they set up when they first launched the new RoboCop, and all these random scenarios that are happening, that he goes out into the field and he's helped solving all these crimes, and that the one guy, and I have to mention it, the one guy who was holding the mayor hostage, I want more coffee.
I want more coffee.
Best line of that movie. I want more coffee. He's listing all these ridiculous things that he wants, all these requests of his to his boss and all the police force, and one of them is, I want more coffee.
I want more coffee. Can I get cruise control on that?
Yeah,
sure.
Cruise control on the new car. So these ridiculous
stuff.
Scenarios that are going on, but it still helps RoboCop. It tells the audience that real situations are happening. The RoboCop is going out and assessing the damage and fixing it, and he's in the force. He is a real cop doing all this, but the comedy throughout, I thought was great.
Undercurrent of satire. If it was great. The car ad for the Suckalux 2000 or whatever.
With the dragon.
Okay, so you had that, but if you notice,
no, it was dinosaur. Or
did
something.
you see the caption of the MPG? It's like 8.6 MPG. And it's something
bigger.
It's bigger.
And it's back.
The 80s, bigger was better.
Yeah.
And, and RoboCop has that littered throughout. So you can look at the social satire for the 80s and whatnot.
I think that was an ode to like Godzilla in that
way too. Absolutely. And yeah, just again, like in the 80s, bigger was better. Just look at the hairstyles.
Definitely. And the glasses.
The glasses.
Definitely 80s.
And then the other thing, too, that, again, when we're peeling the layers of RoboCop, if you notice in the movie, your main character, RoboCop, As he's going along till towards the third act, he's peeling away layers of his technology until the end where he takes off his helmet. I mean, he even takes off his helmet. And we get to see Murphy's face. Fantastic makeup, by the ways.
Great makeup throughout this whole, and we'll touch upon that too.
Yeah. So, so you can look at it that way as a man finding his humanity again and finding his vision and finding his form, his true shape. And the way that certain scenes were directed, like, because when RoboCop is introduced to the audience, we don't see him fully at first. We see him walk on a television monitor, and then we'll see him behind like a beveled glass. Like, you see him in pieces, much like the way he was built.
Like a machine.
Like a machine.
You build a machine in pieces and parts.
And that's how the audience is introduced to him, in pieces, and then and then you see him standing up tall. So, they're again, just one of those happy accidents, like, to get this team together to make this movie. Paul Verhoeven was really cutting his teeth and making a name for himself, and they had a good script to work with. And, again, you can dissect this movie like we are in so many ways, but yet somebody can just go watch this as an action movie and come out, and I think still it feels sort of satisfied.
Yeah, and I want to talk about the technology versus humanity, because when they're building RoboCop, you see the 3 different instances before they officially launch him into the public.
Yeah.
At the beginning, when it's like a computer screen with all this text at the bottom and saying all this information, very computer-like. And it gives you that fact that he's not human, he's computer, he's a machine. And then they're saying, put him back into surgery, which is a very human thing.
Yeah.
When you're fixing humans, you go to surgery. And then the second time, they're like, no, let's make more improvements. And then it goes back. And then when they launch him, it's in front of all these people. And he's walking. He's like, hey, come towards me, let's walk. And so there's a mix of humanity and computer, very subtly. Yeah. But it's there.
Yeah. And, I think it's another thing too, it is important to note that he was Murphy was stripped. He was being stripped. He was being stripped of his humanity. Yes. He was violently, viciously killed. Shot in the head. It's a very Christ-like death. And head of thorns, being shot in the head, and now even you mentioned like. Make an improvement. It's like, well, he still has an arm. It's like, no, get rid of the arm. And it wasn't even like, it was very callous. It was like, get rid of it. It's like, no, he signed his papers. He knew what he was getting into. He's pretty much ours. We can do one more piece of his humanity is taken away from him.
And they also said the line, they're like, they're concerned about him, and it's like, it doesn't matter because we're going to wipe him in anyways.
Yeah,
he's going to wipe his memory.
Yeah, we're going to wipe him in anyways. So,
and I thought that was, even that way, was really cold.
Yeah, very cold.
Just like, there's no humanity there. It's like, whatever, he's machine now.
Remember, he's product.
Yes,
he's product. That's all he is. It's said a couple of times. And so when we do see him, the only and again, I think that this is Peter Weller's. I think as far as a role goes, I think he was fantastic because for a actor, basically the only thing you're seeing of him is maybe not even
his
lips
chin
down, chin down, and he was able to emote with his mouth. His movements, I think, were great.
Handshake. Yeah, they crush him
right. Hand. It was great, and it was really funny. He had done this talk show. I remember seeing, and this was back in 1987 when the movie came out, and he did this talk show, and basically the interviewer was interviewing him, and somebody else came. Oh, who are you interviewing? She goes, I'm interviewing Peter Weller. He's like, who the hell's Peter Weller? And she took like a piece of paper and did this to Peter Weller. He goes, RoboCop! And I'm like, that was a very funny bit.
So like take a piece of paper and cover half of his head.
You cover half his face, but he made it recognizable. He made that was the first and that was the only bit of humanity that RoboCop had.
There really wasn't.
And if you notice again when he was being shot up, there's this one scene and it's purpose, like his visor is getting shot up and you see an eyeball
See an eye.
underneath there. And that's like, ooh, there is an eyeball. Oh my God, I want to know.
There's still a human in
I
this.
want to know what's underneath that. It's almost like, trying to peel what's underneath Darth Vader's helmet.
Yeah, the man beneath the mask.
Yeah, and who is the man
Or
beneath the mask? And when we
behind the mask.
see him, he is human.
Somewhat human. Yeah.
And
But
again,
I loved how his face, the whole front of his face was still intact.
yeah.
That was the one thing that the bad guys didn't shoot up. They shot the
Yeah.
rest of his body, but having the face still completely intact still allows the audience to know that is still human.
Yeah, it gives them something to latch onto, and they still had the bullet wound.
Yeah.
The scarring there. And again, Peter Weller, I think, was fantastic for the role. He primarily got it, not just because he's a good actor, but he fit in the suit. Other people like Rutger Hauer.
Do you know how big the suit was, the original suit?
I don't know how big I don't know how big it was, although I do know how restricting it was. So much so that prior to him getting into the suit, he was working with a mime. He wanted his movements to be very fluid. They felt the technology. They wanted it fluid. They didn't want it to be like a robot. I am a robot.
The stiff joints and all that.
He worked with a mime to get this fluid movement down, and then they put him into the suit, which took about 6+ hours to do.
Wow.
And once that happened, he couldn't move.
Well,
And he's
yeah.
like, I can't move the way that I was trained to move. And they had to go back. It just wasn't working. So he and this mime, they went back and watched old Eisenstein silent movies. Ivan the Terrible, I believe it was, and he mimicked the movements of that because it was a silent movie. Grand gestures, and he said, "This is the only way I can do this." And he let his body move his head. If you notice the way he walked.
I was just going to say that.
Right?
I was like, you can definitely tell with the movements that his body moved first and then his head.
Yeah.
And then he would start moving.
Yeah.
And I love the motion in that.
Yeah, it was very just articulated so that you get it. And even when he shot, he would like pose, shoot, and Peter Weller, what he brought to this role, he really gave as much character to being covered up, I think, and he'll forever be remembered as RoboCop, even though he's been in a ton of other stuff, especially TV. He directs television stuff, so but he'll always be remembered as RoboCop. And you know what? According to interviews I've seen, he doesn't mind, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, and while we're on Peter Weller, how about we just talk about the other supporting cast in this film?
Sure.
Nancy Allen. I mean, she's been in a lot of movies as well.
Absolutely.
Big person in the 80s.
She was a very big person in the 70s and 80s. She was married for some time to Brian De Palma, very stylized director. And I'll even argue to a sense, I think in a sense that she was his muse. She was in movies like Carrie, Dressed to
Blowout.
Kill,
Yeah.
Blowout, which you got. Blowout is one of the best political thrillers out there. She's fantastic in it. And then in RoboCop, of course. She's a good, feisty actress. I think what she lent to this role, what she gave to the role, it was a strong woman who, and you needed that. And it was really
There's a lot of
funny.
strong women in this movie.
Yeah, it was really funny. The only thing that she couldn't take into the role was her hair. They had her cut her hair.
But that made her a bit more masculine too,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
which I think actually enhanced her character.
Yeah, but yet she still was sort of sexy. I mean, I think she's a very attractive woman. I think it's very hard to uglify her. And not that was the point, but you're right. It was to make her masculine, but she was still, she has a face. She's got some beautiful eyes.
Your character can hold her own in this movie too.
Absolutely. And then you had Ronnie Cox as Dick Jones.
Dick Jones.
Now I always remember Ronnie Cox as being the Beverly Hills Cop. He was the chief of police at the Beverly Hills Cop Police Department. So, but he was great. Kurtwood Smith, who most people know from
Red from that 70s show.
Now, You knew him from there prior to RoboCop, right?
Yes.
And for me,
prior
it was
to
vice
RoboCop.
versa. Seeing Kurtwood Smith, seeing this Clarence J. Boddicker character, this guy is...
He was an a-hole.
he was, man, and talk about a villain. Like, he was an a-hole.
He was
very
quite
dark.
the sociopath. He didn't
Absolutely,
care about
didn't
anyone. If he didn't like it, because he didn't like OCP, and he knew that Murphy was in OCP, he's like, nope, get rid of him.
Yep.
Just shoot him off.
Yeah.
And have fun out of it.
And he's such a crazy character. That scene when he goes to negotiate with that coke drug kingpin, and he's like, "Come on!" He goes, "The Detroit Tigers are playing tonight." He goes, "And I never miss a game." He's like, "Come on, guns, guns, guns!" I mean, yeah, that guy was crazy, but Kurtwood Smith was fantastic in that role. So, and then you had the very popular, Dan O'Herlihy as the old man, the head of the company, and I will always affectionately remember him from the not great movie, but Halloween 3. But Dan O'Herlihy again. You got a lot of these people who've been in the business for a while. Peter Weller. He was coming off of Buckaroo Banzai, which is a great cult movie. And like I said, he fit the suit. You had people like Rutger Hauer that they were looking at, Michael Ironsides, who ended up working with Paul Verhoeven a little bit later on in Starship Troopers, but they were just too big.
And
they
then,
couldn't fit the suit.
of course, we had Paul McCrane, who was very young in this movie.
Oh, yeah.
I know him as Dr. Romano from ER.
Yeah.
But he played the younger version of what was his name? Boddicker?
Kurtwood Smith?
Kurtwood Smith's character. Yeah. He was like the younger version. He could have turned into Kurtwood Smith. And I thought he was crazy and maniacal, but yet he still kind of cared for his life. I felt like he was more of the follower, more so than the leader.
Yeah, he was definitely like, you could tell he was almost like the number two.
Yeah, number two guy.
But he too, like the gas station holdup. It's like, hey kid, what you reading in there? And when he shows like the algebra book or whatever.
Oh, you're a college student?
You're a college boy? He
Yeah.
goes, can you outsmart a bullet? And you're like, wow, this guy's a dick too.
Yeah, he really is.
And that's a great scene when RoboCop comes around. That's another thing too that when I was saying that the movie is very Europeanish, because it does do things sort of kind of backwards than what we might be used to. In a movie, when you're having this thing where somebody is coming back to life or coming back to whatever, sometimes they'll run into people that they recognize, and there'll be that recall, and then that person may have that dream about certain things to fill in the gaps. This movie sort of kind of does it backwards, where our RoboCop has a dream. Like and they even said, oh my God, he's had a full-on dream, and he gets up, and in that dream he sees
that dream sparks his humanity.
Right. It's basically, Paul Verhoeven is quoted as saying, it awakens his soul. That was the awakening of, or it was Peter Weller actually who said that. I apologize, but that was the awakening of his soul. And then he runs into those other people. He sees them in his dream. He recognizes, can't quite
remember everyone's names.
Yeah. So when he runs into people, and he runs into Emil, that guy at the gas station, he goes, hey, I thought we killed you.
And he's recording it,
Yeah,
too.
and he's recording it, and he's like, how do I... He goes, who are you? And all this comes back, so the pieces of the puzzle sort of kind of take place sort of backwards.
Yeah, because he takes that footage of who are you and puts it into the analysis database, and then gets his name, and then gets all the other bad guys who was part of that group that helped kill him. So that also helped spark. And then there was a reveal of Murphy.
There was a reveal of who
killed
he
Officer's Murphy, and then there was that click.
Yep. And just prior to, he had run into Lewis. And she called him Murphy, and he kept on walking. She goes, what's your name? And he's like, how can I assist you, Officer Lewis? Just, that's not what I meant. And when he realizes who he was, that he had that life, and who took it away from him, again, the pieces of the puzzle start to form. His humanity starts to come through. His technology is being stripped away. Again, it's a great, when he goes to his home to see if his wife and kid may still be there.
And I love how blended that the smooth transitions between his viewing of the whole empty house into memories that he had.
His human memories.
Yes, his human memories. I thought that was executed brilliantly.
Yeah, and the house is lonely, desolate. There's
one's
trash
there.
and dry leaves blowing through the place. It was a great realization for Murphy, showing what he had, and when he punches the monitor at the end, and he even asks Lewis at a point what happened to them, and they're like, they thought you were dead. They moved on. And again, I had read or heard that in the script, Verhoeven had a scene where he actually goes back to the house and they're still living there, and he meets his son. And
is this the original script?
Yeah, in a version of the script, and he eventually took it out because he found that it would be too sentimental. And I agree. It would have had no place in this particular story for that to happen, because you needed the character to grow some more.
Yeah. And if we saw his family in real life,
right,
then we would expect more character development on there.
Sure.
From them, and I feel like that wouldn't fit with the movie either.
Yeah, it wouldn't. Like, there would have had to have been something at the end or something going on. So I really enjoyed, or I really respect the decisions made to get this movie filmed, shot, and done. I thought they did a really good job.
Yeah,
I like that they excised.
And I want to talk about the visual aspects of the movie, like the special effects.
Sure.
Were really well done, especially for the 80s back then, when they didn't really have the technology that we have today.
No.
Hence, the new RoboCop movie that's coming out. They want to enhance that. But back in the 80s, when what they made RoboCop, the special effects, very gruesome, especially when Paul Greengrass's character, not Greengrass, Paul McCrane's character, sorry. When he was in the toxic waste, he's
the Toxic Avenger.
His whole body was literally melting. I had a hard time looking at him, and I knew it was just special effects, but I thought that was so well done.
And when he hits the car and just explodes, I remember the first time watching the movie, and that happened, you're like, holy shit. That's like, oh my God, I didn't see that coming. And the special effects to me are great, because it's a combination. It wasn't just, there was definitely an artistry, and they used models, and they used a lot of squibs. But the other thing too to note is, this was a time where they used matte paintings. They used matte artists, and there was a lot of matte work done in this movie. And, we're living in a technological age, where you can find some stuff online. There's a cool thing about the special effects, visual effects done on Wolf of Wall Street, in which, they'll show that beach house, and then they'll show what the digital artist rendered around that beach house and stuff like that. You can YouTube it, just look up Wolf of Wall Street special effects. It's sort of kind of cool. But when you're going back to 1987, there wasn't this digital capability. You relied on artists to do paintings. Yeah. And what's great is, look at some of like Star Wars. Look at some of these, Star Trek the Motion Picture and stuff like that. Look at some of the special features, and look at how a matte painting could extend a room, give you a depth that would make you afraid of heights, and you're basically looking at a painting. And RoboCop used that a lot, as well as they used models, and they used an old, Harryhausen technique of stop motion. Phil Tippett.
The first RoboCop version that they had in the film that ruthlessly killed that executive.
Oh, yeah.
Like, he's dead.
Yep.
And I just got to say that the reactions from everybody, that yes, they're in shock, but I'm like, really, no one's really freaking out properly about someone just got shot to death in front of you, and you're not really doing much about it.
Again, that's another scene that was so over the top. It's a tragic death.
That was another. I would say that was another gruesome death, maybe as equally as Murphy's death.
Yeah, but to me, I remember, to me, it's like it was done so over the top because those turrets just don't stop spitting out those bullets, and it just becomes so over the top. It's almost comical. It's like
it is.
It just like at first you're shocked, but it just keeps going, and you're like, oh my god, it's a great scene. But the Ed 209. The stop motion effects, which Phil Tippett did. That's specifically what he was there for. And this is a guy that worked on Star Wars and Indiana Jones movies and later on Jurassic Park. I mean, this is a guy that's great at this. This is his forte. But the artistry in making a stop animation for that. And yes, you kids, you can look at it today and go, oh, it's not polished and stuff. And I argue, you know what? There is something about it that makes the stop animation and made it look robotic enough where you buy it.
I was gonna say more. I felt the stop animation made it more animalistic.
Yeah,
more far away from humanity than what the second RoboCop was. But especially when there was a moment it was chasing RoboCop, we'll call him 2.0, Murphy, and when he's chasing him down the stairs, and he trips and falls, and the RoboCop is literally on his back like a turtle, trying to, get back on his feet. And I felt a more animalistic quality to the first RoboCop.
And his sounds, like that thing would growl at you. And
very animal, like very primal.
And it's funny that scene that you're talking about was basically filmed as a model set. And they had the model of Ed 209, they had the stairs, and they just basically pushed it. And they filmed it.
Down the stairs.
And again, you're talking about a very simple technique and something where technology can't grasp the simplicity of walking downstairs, what we look at as being simple because we're biped, and that was sort of a biped, but it couldn't grasp stairs.
The feet couldn't go down the stairs. Couldn't.
And it's a comedic moment.
And it was done very comically. And I thought that was the great. And then let's go into the sound effects that also enhanced everything that happened. Yeah. The blasting of the shooting the guns was crazy, but there were some moments of the RoboCop, the first one, that added to that animal characters that growling as you mentioned, and then I felt like there was like screeching kind of.
Oh, when it was on its back? Yeah. It's screeching like a wild animal that's trapped. You know? And
then the sound effects for actual RoboCop.
Sure.
When he's walking around, his footsteps were so... Yeah,
like
exactly.
You felt the heaviness of that armor that he's walking around in. Yeah. And, it would have been fun for me to have been able to, have been on set, to watch them filming that, because the sound effects aren't done in yet, and then watching with the cast and crew the finished product, to go, wow, that's crazy, because it's two different things, and when you add that level of a sound effect when he's walking, it's just great. Great.
Yeah, it really enhanced it. And this movie actually did win Academy Award for
Best sound editing.
Best sound editing. Yeah. And you can definitely tell throughout the whole movie, like the sound just really elevated it. Yeah. Because seeing it is one thing, but hearing it is a whole different level.
Absolutely. And again, that, if you're able to see this in a theater, that has great sound system to go, but the Blu-ray, the sound mix on the Blu-ray is fantastic. And like when he's getting shot, it's encompassing. It's all encompassing. All the gunfights, the car chase scenes, like that when they were chasing the van. Again, it really sounds fantastic. The gasoline, the gas station explosion. Yeah,
we did get the explosion in this movie.
Yep.
Action movie done.
Right, and just everything from the sound of his interface spike, and how that comes out and he puts it in and twists.
Then even his voice, there was a touch of humanity to it. It sounded like a normal human voice, but it also had a robo kind of reverb on it.
Sure, but it didn't sound too
it was really subtle, but you can tell it wasn't fully human, fully robot.
Yeah.
But let's go into the actual costume of robots.
Sure.
I know you know a lot of more so about the actual suit, but especially peeling back, and then you can see his human face.
Sure.
But the back of him is still robot.
Right.
Like his brain
Yeah.
is still kind of robotic and machine, but the face in the front is like he's seeing human things.
Now, that scene, RoboCop in the third act, apparently those scenes took about, the makeup was intensive. It took about 8 hours to do. For his face and for melding that suit. And Robotine, fantastic makeup artist. This guy, probably most famous for working on John Carpenter's The Thing. He's done a lot of other things. That's my favorite thing of his. He did some spectacular special effects makeup thing. But if one thing you noticed in that third act RoboCop, you peel off his helmet, and his forehead is higher than you know what I'm saying? Like his forehead overlaps the mechanical part. And when the camera goes around, you can see that there are tubes and things going into him, and there's like some swelling where some tubes are. Just fantastic special effects, fantastic makeup. But, you know, for Peter Weller, he said it was excruciating. He said,
I believe that.
You know, he would see people coming into work and leaving work while he was still in the same chair as they were trying to apply this makeup.
Poor guy.
On him. And they said that the suit was probably, out of the $13 million budget, that suit was probably the most expensive bit of hardware that they used in that movie. Yeah, absolutely.
So the things actors do for their craft, to have that patience to sit in the chair for so long, and it happens with a lot of actors throughout who has to really deal with prosthetics and makeup every single day. So I just applaud anyone who has to go through that.
Yeah, I wish Sarah were here, because I'd go, would you sit in the chair for 8 hours? Like, you know, getting that in. And he lost 3 pounds a day in liquid and like just sweat from being in that. 3 pounds a day.
He's losing a lot of water.
That's insane.
But that also goes to show like how heavy that suit probably was, and if it really was metal, then it's gonna get hot.
Yeah, you know, it was. I don't believe it was metal. It was a very reflective, good, you know, like good hardware plastic.
Like,
but
having all that and the layers upon layers, it's gonna get hot.
Oh yeah, it's in you know, and again, what Peter Weller was able to do with that. You know, I agree with you. You have to give, you know, this movie rests on whether or not you believe RoboCop. Mm-hmm. And if, you know, you had another actor who may not have been as comfortable, or who didn't take the time to get used to being in that suit and take the time to work with a mime, you know, and work out the movements, the movie wouldn't have worked. It would have looked silly. It would have looked silly.
But even that, and doing the research for how just the physicality of everything, and still you can still tell it's Robo. It's a man and a machine. Yeah. I thought that was brilliantly executed. But for 1987, a lot of big movies came out, and the marketing for this, I mean, it opened up to number one. Yeah,
it opened up July 17th. It opened up number one, did $8 million on 1,500 locations. Now, the marketing of the movie, I mean, I think what helped, again, when you talk about a happy accident, when you talk about these things converging and all the stars aligning for RoboCop, number one, you know, back if you were 1985, 1986, and you're an executive and you're looking, I can understand how RoboCop is like, what the hell is this? I remember I was in college at the time and seeing the commercials for a night, you know, RoboCop. It's like, it sounds sort of silly without having seen the movie. But then something weird, like, you know, I was fortunate enough, I saw it at a screening and it wowed me. I saw it 3 times that summer. But then something else really happened that was weird and very unexpected. It started getting good reviews. Like, people were like, it was getting good. Critics were really liking this movie. And, you know, when you had the marketing, you had a trailer, you had a great poster in 87, an iconic poster that had the great tagline, part man, part machine, all cop. And when you get good reviews, then you're going to get audiences to come. And at the end of the day, it was for that year. It came in at it was the 16th highest grossing movie of the year, and it did about $53 million. Not too shabby for a movie that cost 13.
That's pretty good. And especially back in 1987, money was different back then.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Money was different. Your ticket prices were way cheaper.
Yeah.
Your budgets, and again, you're talking about a $13 million movie. Let's see if this has how many weeks RoboCop was out into the marketplace. I don't have that information, unfortunately. I apologize for that. But movies stayed in theaters a hell of a lot longer. Even looking at the top 10, for that year, you're looking at some movies 6, 7, 5, 9 weeks. A lot of times 9 weeks, movies are pretty much done.
Yeah,
they're not sticking around, and they're out. So, yeah, it was, it was a very different time.
Yeah.
And RoboCop came out, and I think, it was a sleeper. For me, it was a sleeper. I didn't anticipate really liking the movie as much as I did. And
neither did I.
Yeah, and it works.
But so my question is that because it was, as we can say, a successful movie back in 1987, back then, do you think it's necessary that they're making a remake, even though the original was good on its own?
Yeah, that's a great question. My gut instinct says no. If you're gonna make a remake, okay, you don't choose a movie that was successful. And I bought into the Total Recall remake, and you and I talked about this. And Total Recall, again, directed by Paul Verhoeven.
The original Total Recall.
Yeah, the original Total Recall. That's a classic Schwarzenegger movie.
Yeah.
That has really good themes in it as well, and it's a good mystery. It's great action. It's violent.
Great storyline.
Yeah. And when they said that they were going to remake that, I was like, why? The movie was a success. It has its following. And then they were going to make it PG-13. But I was grabbed by the marketing. I'm going to admit it. They did a good job marketing the movie, and I said, this movie looks like it'll be okay. By the end of it, Total Recall, the remake, made me angry. I know you liked it more than I did. Kate Beckinsale's in it. Her husband, I believe, directed it.
Yeah, Len Wiseman directed the remake.
But in the end, it made me angry. As soon as they said that we're going to do RoboCop, I was like, okay, do you have to keep on going back to Paul Verhoeven movies, number one? Like, why? And RoboCop has a cult status that it's already placed on some semblance of a science fiction pedestal.
Exactly. Like a lot of these 80s movies that have already been established and had their following and whatnot, do you think that they will keep that same demographic, that same following for the new remakes?
I don't know. And going in, and because I was so soured from Total Recall, we've had conversations about this. I actually have gone on, I've said that this remake of RoboCop, the 2014, I've been calling it RoboFlop. I mean, how good can it be? I mean, I don't know. But then again, something else surprising has happened. Reviews on it and reviews from geek type of sites have been favorable thus far. So, which is shocking to me. And it's sort of kind of, I'm afraid to say it, but it sort of kind of has gotten my curiosity. What are they going to do with this? How are they going to update it? Again, it's PG-13. Violence in RoboCop was there for a reason, and now you're taking that out. You're going to make it with a CG kind of violence, and I don't know. It sort of scares me, but right now, I'll try to do my best to keep an open mind for when the remake comes out next week.
February 12th, 2014.
Yeah, I'll check it out, but I'm going in with my shields up on this one. I don't want to get tricked by the
I think
marketing.
anyone who goes to a movie will obviously have their doubts about things or their expectations, especially having an original movie that they've already seen and compare it to. They're going to already go, and then with those kind of boundaries and whatnot, those limitations that they have with movies. But the new remake of RoboCop, I feel like it'll obviously apply more nowadays, more modernized, and there are actors that we recognize in today's society. Like Samuel Jackson's in the new movie.
Gary Oldman, Michael Keaton.
Yeah, so there are notable names in this movie as well as there was in the 80s back then.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I think because the time between these two releases are so far apart that maybe people can separate from the original and go in with the new one with a more open mind.
Look, if the reviews continue, and right now, the last I checked at Rotten Tomatoes, it was at 50%. If the reviews continue, I mean, I'll give it the benefit of the doubt. I'm gonna check it out. I will check it out for the sake of the show. If we decide to dissect the remake, which I think would be good because we'll at least be able to have the compare and contrast, and then we could put a definitive answer to, was it necessary or not? How does a PG-13 work as opposed to a rated R? I think we have lots. We could have lots to talk about.
How's the technology different? There are a lot of different. Fortunately,
story structure.
Yeah, a lot of things are so different in today. Like 20, almost 30 years.
Agreed.
After the original, there's going to be so many things that are different that we can compare it to. Yeah. Which I think would be an interesting conversation.
Yeah, I think it could be. I really do. Whether the movie's good or bad, I think that this group could put a good definitive exclamation point on it. You know, for me in a remake, it's really tough. I don't understand why you pick. It's obviously you're going for a franchise. They're trying to and Phil said it. Phil, go ahead, chime in. Why are they doing it? Money. Yeah, and
because RoboCop 2 and 3 were flops. You could call RoboFlops.
Yeah, they were RoboFlops.
And then they had the TV series.
Listen,
of RoboCop.
The RoboCop franchise thus far took this really bizarre twist and turn when you break it down. You had this ultra-violent satiric movie that comes out, makes a statement. This RoboCop 2, RoboCop 3, each was worse than the other. They were just not good movies. And then, but this weird marketing thing happened where they took RoboCop out of the rated R, very violent, crazy world that he was in, and they started making RoboCop toys that had snap caps so kids could, I mean, and when I'm talking kids, I'm not talking, kids could play with this stuff.
Very 80s too, with marketing like Star Wars. When that came out, the whole merchandise went up the roof.
Oh, yeah.
There was so much.
The genie was out of the bottle. And you were making RoboCops and Ed 209s, and then it became a cartoon. Like there was a cartoon, I believe, on like Saturday mornings where kids were watching a RoboCop cartoon. So he became more of a cartoonish superhero.
But he was appealing to more demographics, the younger version.
Appealing to kids, and they could sell more toys. And then it was a television series
and
for a short time.
If you think about it, those kids who watched it back then are adults now, so they're going to be wanting to, maybe out of pure curiosity, what the new RoboCop will be.
Yeah, they could, and again, but those kids shouldn't have been allowed to have seen, like, especially if they're like 9, 10, like the original, the second movie. And again, here's a weird thing too about the progression. So you had RoboCop, it's a hit. Naturally, there's going to be a sequel. Frank Miller writes the script. Irvin Kershner, who's coming off of like The Empire Strikes Back, like the holy grail of Star Wars movies. Yeah. He's coming in to direct RoboCop 2. They get Peter Weller back. Nancy Allen is back. And you're like, how can this go wrong? And then you see the movie. And the movie, it's a very angry, mean-spirited movie. And whatever satire was in the first one, whatever was done for laughs, this movie it didn't get it. They really stripped away the humanity of what RoboCop, the first one, was, and they made a very mean-spirited, not a good movie. And it was the end of Irvin Kershner's career. He never directed another movie again. So the movie still made money. Critical acclaim was not there. But they decide to go for a RoboCop 3. And this time,
try to redeem itself.
They go PG-13. they used elements of Frank Miller's script. They bring in this guy by the name of Fred Decker, who was most famous at the time for this really cool Shane Black script called The Monster Squad. He had done this other movie called Night of the Creeps, which is a great cult B horror movie that blends comedy with horror. It's really good. They get him to do RoboCop 3. The movie has like CCH Pounder. Nancy Allen comes back again. And this movie, PG-13, again, it's just laughable. And you could tell that they had shifted and they were trying to get the kids to come in. You had RoboCop flying. It was just dopey.
Really upping it.
Oh my God.
Trying
it
to
was
make
just
RoboCop cool.
awful. So you just figure, done, franchise over. But yeah, it spawns television shows. It spawned comic books. So the legacy of RoboCop lived on. So, who knows with this remake coming out, maybe it's rebooting a whole larger thing other than the original.
Yeah, and if you think about it, since 1987, there have been robots kind of movies out there. iRobot and
absolutely
Total Recall was a remake, but
Sure.
robots that sentient beings.
Yep.
But I think people are fascinated with that.
Yeah, and again, this is going to be a PG-13 movie. I will be curious to see how seriously they take the subject matter. So it's not cartoonish, so it's not buffoonish, so to speak. And
you had talked about that the new RoboCop remake movie. It seems like there are more character developments of Murphy.
Well, I can only go by the trailer. I haven't seen the movie.
Right.
The trailer shows him as being with his family and him becoming in his state, not because he's violently shot, but a car bomb. He goes to his car, he's blown to bits. We're also seeing that he has a human hand in this movie, as opposed to the original where there was nothing really left.
Yeah.
Organically human, anyways. And so there are some differences right there. Again, the story structure seems to go like what I was saying before. You're going to build up his character, and then they're going to kill him off. Other than killing him off, and then build up his character and peel away the layers. Which, again, for 1987, I found that to be a very brave take on this. In science fiction, you can sort of kind of get away with doing that.
And if you think about it, Star Wars with Darth Vader, The Return of the Jedi, that he peeled away, and that was one of the biggest reveals of any 1980s movies.
Absolutely.
And that was so iconic that I felt like they mimicked that to really make RoboCop memorable in a way.
Great point. Because, again, we'll go back to Irvin Kershner and Empire Strikes Back. There's that 5-second scene where you're looking from behind
you
Vader.
See the head and the helmet goes down.
And you're like,
I love Star Wars.
And you just want to go, I want to see the whole thing. And then when the technology comes off, and we see Potato Head there.
Yep.
But it's humanistic. Eyes, nose, mouth.
Everything.
And that's what RoboCop is. Yeah. So, it's a fantastic point. And it's a great analogy.
Oh, yeah. And I loved it. And that's exactly what I thought. I was like, this is Darth Vader.
Yeah.
But he's good.
He's a good guy.
He's a good guy. I mean, Darth Vader did end up being good in the end.
Right.
Spoiler alert for anyone who hasn't seen Star Wars. I mean, come on. But overall, I did enjoy RoboCop, the original. I'm just curious to see what creative elements that they add in the new remake.
Me too.
And just how they're going to spice it up and make it more modern. Yeah. Hopefully apply it to nowadays, because when you're watching the original RoboCop, it's very dated, you can tell with all the new segments that they put a time stamp on it.
Yeah.
But I hope RoboCop now will appeal maybe more so.
It's interesting.
Today's society.
And it's interesting because a lot of the themes in the original RoboCop, I think, still carry on to today. Corporate greed.
Definitely.
So those elements could, they could theoretically still be in this remake. It's piqued my curiosity enough where, I will probably be there Wednesday, Thursday night to check it out and, let you know whether or not it makes me angry. One thing I am curious about, too, is whether or not they'll have the religious inferences, the symbolism. I mean, religion in a movie today can be a very hot
It's a hot topic
hot
now.
Button, you know?
And I find that really unfortunate because now so much you kind of mention religion in a movie and people turn to shun that. And I find that's a bit disappointing.
Yeah, and so I'm curious.
I mean, it can really add to a story. If you're so against it, then it could really turn you off. But I think people should be just a little bit more open, because even though if you slap the word religion on it, it can still get a certain moral message across. And
that, to me, is where science fiction gets away with it. You know, I mean, you know, we talked about Philomena not too long ago. Deep, you know, that was steeped in that religion and what's going on. It's a drama. You know, when you look at something like a science fiction movie, sometimes you have to look for it. Sometimes it's right there, right in front of your face. And the message can be clear. But sometimes what's fun about it is going back and watching the movie. And RoboCop is essentially a movie about resurrection. And the references are from beginning to end. Beginning, middle, end. From the moment he gets shot and killed, he's in a crucifix position. He loses his hand, which is the nailing onto the cross. He gets shot in the head, which blossoms into the crown, so to speak.
Crown of thorns.
Yeah, I mean, there's a scene at the end where it appears as if he's walking on water, you know, when he kills, and these are all done on purpose. He is also, when he lances Boddicker with his spike, you know, I mean, he's in the water. You know, the reference could be he's turning water into wine because it's changing from clear to blood. I mean, and he becomes self-aware. He becomes Murphy. His soul is awakened. He ascends, and now he is the moral compass for New Detroit. He is going to be the template, and he will be the good guy. He's going to be that sheriff in town who will have that moral compass. So the themes of resurrection and RoboCop, when you want to break it down,
I think it's something to look forward to, and uses that as an ideal candidate.
Absolutely.
Made in the creation of, you know, his maker.
Yeah.
That I think those religious undertones still have a meaning.
Absolutely. And you know, you talk about the manipulation and the corruption, and you know, when you look at why Murphy was transferred to this station, and you learn that OCP, they own the police force, and through Miguel Ferrera's character, he has said, you know, we've been moving pieces around our pawns to put them in ideal situations so they can become candidates for the RoboCop project. Not that they went so far to mastermind Murphy and Lewis going to the steel warehouse and
they set him up to knock him down.
They set him up so that they could be candidates for being turned into RoboCop, and this marriage of technology and how we can, you know, these are all the themes that I'm curious. Will kids understand that today? Will they look to want to understand that today? You know, I hope so. And I hope that a lot of those themes are not sort of kind of glossed over. If you're going to remake RoboCop, because those are what made the original. It's why we're still talking about RoboCop, the original, today.
Yeah, I agree.
You know, what legacy will the new one have?
Right. I think the new one will definitely be interesting. And I think it'll be a fun comparison, especially because nowadays Hollywood's just making remakes or making extensions of what the originals were, just adding on to franchises.
Yeah, the focus so much is, you know, the focus and the desperateness to come up with a franchise, as opposed to, like, when we talked about this, making something original, which they can do, and making that one original movie just great so that everybody wants to see it. But with RoboCop, they do have a name, you know, that says it all. It's a trademark. It's a commercial name, and they can sell more product off it if it is successful. I just hope that it's good.
Yeah, and I feel like today, right now, in the early or 2014, 2013 era time, that a lot of sequels that are coming out or franchises that are starting are all comedies. Like Anchorman 2 came out. The Hangover movies, those are all comedies.
Yeah.
So, and I think Hollywood needs to find a new type of science fiction franchise that we can start that's original.
Sure. I mean, unfortunately, I don't think there'll be a sequel for Gravity anytime soon.
No.
But no, I mean, it's you can do it. I mean, it can be done.
It has been done.
And yeah, absolutely. And who knows? Who knows with RoboCop this remake? One thing we didn't talk about the music in RoboCop.
Oh, right.
I mean,
the
Basil
composer,
Polidoris.
Basil.
Yeah, I mean,
he's known for other.
Absolutely. I mean, you were talking about a very iconic score. Is there any way we can bring up any of the?
I believe we do have Basil's music.
Yeah, I mean it's booming, it's loud,
I think great. I said last night as I watched this movie, I was like, you can tell the composing. It sounds very 80s. I felt like I don't know how you explain 80s, but loud orchestral kind of epic building in a way, and then
he was like Hans Zimmer before Hans Zimmer. Like I mean,
yes.
Absolutely.
And this does kind of feel like a spaghetti western type of music as well.
Oh my God, yes. I'm just trying to find...
Like, I can picture a cowboy, a sheriff on a horse.
Right. It's very westernish.
Very westernish.
And then it's very big. It's like, just like our hero. Heroic music. Like, for characters riding a motorcycle or in a car. And, listen, Basil Polidoris, Conan the Barbarian.
Yeah.
Starship Troopers, The Hunt for Red October.
Yes, very.
Right? I mean, this guy has done some great score, and it's like, but this one, very remembered for, like, this one you can play against the Conan or A Hunt for Red October, and people will go, RoboCop, I recognize.
And you can put this in any Western movie too, and still feels...
Absolutely. As he rides off into the sunset.
Yeah, exactly.
It's funny, since we talk about riding off into the sunset and technology, the other great thing, too, is like towards the end when they have that big fight at the steel mill. Right. Lewis gets shot. She saves the day. RoboCop, and she's like, Murphy, I'm in bad shape. And he goes, don't worry. They can fix you. Mm-hmm. It's just that one line. It's like...
And then he gets up. You don't really see him get up, and I love that you can just see him moving. You know he's strong enough as a robot that he can pick himself back up.
And don't forget, and when you talk about resurrection, when he goes to arrest Jones, okay, Jones has put this thing into him, this classified code 4, which means if you arrest any OCP top management, you're going to be shut down. And it is Murphy's humanity which keeps him alive.
Yeah,
because
he was
going to
go choke him, but
and he doesn't shut down. Like,
because the third rule was what? Uphold
maintain the peace, maintain the peace, uphold the law, and something about hurting. Not to hurt civilians or something to that effect. We should bring them up, and I should know this. But, his mechanical side, his technology side is shutting down. And it's his humanistic side that fights and lives. And at the end, when he's lifting that thing off, and again, his mask is off. Yep. He's Murphy. So at the end, and he says it with a smile. And that's where the movie ends. Boom. Yep. Perfect.
Done.
You get it.
You don't need anything else.
Nope.
Because we don't know. We got a little bit of his family, but nothing else.
Yep.
And the bad guys are dead.
Bad guys are gone.
Done. And objective over.
Yep. And we see that maybe there is, that great dawning of a new Detroit coming. So it's good stuff. Yeah. That's why RoboCop remains as a sci-fi science fiction classic.
Yeah. I enjoyed it, and again, it'll be interesting to see the remake. But I'm glad that we dissected the original.
Yeah. I think, come on, it's it's worthy, it's hip, it's cool. That's everything that embodies anatomy of a movie.
Yeah, exactly.
and geekiness.
Anatomy.
So yeah, it's great stuff. I'm really glad we did this. I hope to do the remake.
It'll be fun if you definitely do.
Yeah.
So, thank you everyone who's been listening. You can follow all of us here on Anatomy of a Movie on Twitter at Movie Anatomy. Demetri, where can you find
me? You can find me here at anatomyofamovie.com. Make your comments. Tell us what you think about the show. It's very, very important. I love to hear the feedback. We're giving you feedback on movies. Give feedback on us, because it's only fair.
We're getting some ratings on Anatomy of a Movie, 5 stars. So
yeah.
It's good.
So let us know what you think. And you know what? We're not the be-all, end-all, too, folks. Like, you might know something that we don't.
Keep the conversation going.
Keep it going.
Keep it going. Thank you for all who's listening. It'll be fun if we did RoboCop 2. And we will see you for the next film.
See you for the next movie.
From producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the rest of the Anatomy of a Movie staff, we would like to thank you for listening and subscribing to the show. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to email or tweet us. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been Anatomy of a Movie.
Thanks for watching Anatomy of a Movie on YouTube. For more on your favorite movies, subscribe to our channel here and be sure to let us know what you think in our comment section below here. Bye.